Hello and welcome. I'm Louise Watt and this is Correspondents, where we talk about the news and what's going on behind the news with reporters around the region. Donald Trump has been back in the White House for a month now, and he's already fired the opening shot in a potential trade war with China. But Beijing has been quick to hit back. So what next? Will we see escalation or negotiation? And what about Taiwan? Trump has made it clear tariffs could be on the cards for it as well. But does the world's foremost chip producer have some cards of its own up its sleeve? Also ahead, Chinese startup DeepSeek and a new AI model made on the relative cheap have taken the world by storm. But what's the reaction been in China? Well, to find out about all this and more, I'm joined by two Taipei-based journalists, David Demes, a freelancer for German media, including Berlin newspaper Tagesspiegel, and Table Briefings, which publishes briefings about China and the region at large. And Kris Lih, a reporter for news site Domino Theory, covering regional politics and tech development. Thank you both for joining me on Correspondents.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Now, 12 days after becoming president, Donald Trump slapped tariffs on China, 10%. Beijing swiftly responded, putting up to 15% tariffs on some American imports. David, is this the start of another long and painful trade war, similar to what we saw under Trump the first time around?
I think we're definitely seeing the first signs of a new trade conflict on the horizon. I mean, as you just mentioned, Trump just imposed 10% tariffs on all Chinese goods coming to the U.S. and then more recently also raised tariffs on steel and aluminium coming to the US. And then China responded quite quickly with their own set of tariffs on some US goods. I think up to the total of around $14 billion worth of US goods coming to China. Maybe what's even more consequential, they added new export restrictions for rare earths and minerals. So maybe that's something that, especially in technology and weapons manufacturing, that the US will feel quite sharply, these export controls from China.
Because China dominates the processing of those industries.
So yeah, I definitely think there's a new trade war on the horizon, but we'll have to see how that plays out, and I'm not sure whether there'll be a winner to see in the near future.
So David thinks there's a new trade war on the horizon. Chris, where are we heading with this?
Well, I think, with both China and the U.S., they're definitely in a better position economically speaking than, say, back in 2018. This is a prolonged economic battle that could still harm the global markets. And so I think a lot of people have to ask the key question is whether they escalate to a full-scale economic decoupling or strike new, compromises behind closed doors.
And of course, they're better prepared because both economies, I guess, have diversified from each other since the first time around. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes. I think China is probably much better prepared this time around than last time. They've been able to diversify away from just being reliant on US markets, and then also build up a more stronger industrial base. And also they're leading in certain areas in emerging technologies like EVs. Yeah. So I think they're much better prepared for this, upcoming battle than the US, who's still pretty much reliant on at least Chinese manufacturing parts for a lot of the manufacturing that's going on in the US still. So.
And Trump says he's had a phone call with President Xi Jinping since he came to power. Yeah. And he said, we have a very good personal relationship, and it's not the first time he said words to that effect. Chris, how much of this potential trade war, how far it goes, will come down to the personal relationship between the two leaders?
Trump definitely has, like you said, he has complimented Xi on various occasions, and also acknowledged the two of them have a positive relationship. But Xi hasn't really said much about Trump or any other world leaders in general. So I think in a way we have to wait and see what the what China does next in response to all these actions coming from the U.S. side.
David, are you seeing that any possibility that China may react differently this time around to President Trump? Because President Trump, in a way, he's got a different team around him. He's got his own loyalists in the White House, people who think like him, want to carry out his policies, and he said some very bold statements. He's made a lot of world leaders nervous. Will he have made Xi nervous too, do you think?
I think so, yes. I mean, just the first round of tariffs that we've seen from both sides already like a sign that we're not seeing just a repetition of the first Trump term, right? I mean, during the first Trump term, Xi Jinping was trying very hard to just pull all the stops for Trump when he visited China. They gave him the private tour of the Forbidden City, and I think Xi was probably quite disappointed to find out that even though he tried so hard, to play to Trump's love of pageantry, that in the end, Trump still started a trade war with China and even sold Taiwan a record number of weapons. So I think Xi probably knows now that he cannot just rely on all of these superficial ways to try to persuade Trump. He needs to bring trade and other cards to the table to negotiate with Trump. For us as observers, I think Chinese politics is always a black box, right? We don't really know, as Kris mentioned, what Xi really thinks. He doesn't really talk about it publicly, but I think it's fair to say that Xi Jinping is probably quite happy with how things are turning out in the U.S. and how the U.S. helped Trump is taking a sledgehammer to U.S. institutions like USAID and also weakening traditional U.S. alliances like NATO. So I think we've already seen reporting to the effect that Xi Jinping and China are already moving into the gaps that are opened up because of the U.S. leaving, for example, countries like Nepal and other countries in the region to themselves, and Chinese officials and NGOs or gongos, like government NGOs, are moving into these spaces. So he's probably pretty happy with what's happening.
Well, Trump has also broached the idea of tariffs on Taiwanese chip makers. Take a listen to what he said.
In the very near future, we're going to be placing tariffs on foreign production of computer chips, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals to return production of these essential goods to the United States of America. They left us and they went to Taiwan. Going to want to pay a 25, 50, or even 100% tax.
So he's talking about tariffs of up to 100% on semiconductors. David, you've been talking to people who are in the industry here in Taiwan about this. Given that Taiwan makes most of the world's most advanced chips, and its biggest customers are the likes of Apple and Nvidia, so how do people here see this? Who is going to be harmed mostly by this? Taiwanese chip makers or their American customers?
The experts that I've been talking to recently all agree that probably the largest burden will have to be carried by U.S. companies and then also consumers in the end, because prices will have to go up. And Taiwanese companies, as you mentioned, they produce the most advanced logic chips, so it's not something you can just replace with American, like made in America, right, like tomorrow or the next week. So still the US and companies like Nvidia, Apple, they're all dependent on Taiwan basically. So I think we will definitely see more hurt for the American middle class, more consumer prices going up. So for Taiwan, I think they have pretty big bargaining chip themselves. They'll be able to negotiate with the know-how and the industrial base they have here.
So from chips now to something that chips are used for, AI. A previously little known Chinese AI company DeepSeek has taken the tech world by storm with its reasoning model R1. Now, it's almost as powerful as the Silicon Valley firm OpenAI's most advanced model, but purportedly created with a lot less money than many in the industry thought possible, and with far fewer chips. After everyone realized this, US tech companies saw their stocks dive. So DeepSeek, it's triggered shock and awe in the West. Kris, how has it been seen in China itself, though?
Well, it's definitely almost you can call it a national pride, I suppose. DeepSeek itself is experiencing a large amount of downloads, and a lot of Chinese media have reported the emerging how DeepSeek is an emerging new product coming out of China to challenge the U.S. market, and also this shows that China is no longer just a country that mimics. It's also a country that can innovate. It's sending a message to the American designers or coders or the American market in general that you're not the only one who can innovate things now. We're also the innovative ones.
Because DeepSeek, of course, is just one of many Chinese companies that are trying to create AI models and so forth. And they're working as part of Xi's plan to make China the world leader in AI by 2030. So do you think these latest developments, Kris, make that plan look more possible?
For sure. And this is all part of China's 14 five-year plan. It's a set of plans that China aiming itself as a product. They're improving the product in various aspects, from on the economic side to on the heavy industry side, and now with technology, especially AI, that's part of the targets in this 14th five-year plan.
DeepSeek's answers at times can be seen to be parroting the Chinese Communist Party's line. David, is this why countries including Taiwan are banning it?
I think it's definitely part of the equation, but I think the most important part is just information security and national security, because as you say, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia have all, and I think Italy as well, have all banned or just added limitations on the use of DeepSeek by their government officials. I think for them it's mostly about information security, because in the past we've had this long discussion about TikTok, right, and security of TikTok, and whether user data from the U.S. or from other countries would be transferred to China, to Chinese servers. They always said it's on U.S. servers, so the data is safe. But then with DeepSeek, they're actually quite open about our servers all in China, so your information will definitely go to China. So, and as we know, in the Chinese institutional context, private companies, they have to submit everything to the government if the government requests. So in this case, I think people are just worried about the amount of data that might be collected and farmed by these companies. And it's just not only private, like personal data, identifying data, but also keystroke patterns, all of that stuff.
A few weeks after DeepSeek, Chinese giant Alibaba released an AI model that it says surpasses DeepSeek.
Right.
It's called Qwen 2.5, but it hasn't got the same kind of attention in the West or even in China. Kris, why not?
Well, I think it's because DeepSeek came first, so that was the government's main focus right now. But then I think sooner or later, Alibaba's 通义千问, so that's the Chinese name for Qwen, is also going to get, I wouldn't say equal amount of attention, but then still a good amount of attention. And I'm sure the government will use various ways to help that product to have more exposure. Recently, I just tested Qwen, and I kept asking Qwen about certain topics like, can you briefly introduce the PLA to me? And,
that's the Chinese military.
Right. And it told me that, I'm sorry, I cannot tell you too much about it because this has to deal with confidentiality. And then I kept asking the same thing again, why not? And then it eventually gives itself up by saying, I'm sorry, I don't have the ability to answer this question. Can we try something else? And similar pattern plays out when I try with other questions such as, can you explain the Taiwan situation, as well as the Tiananmen thing. Clearly that all these AIs coming out of the Chinese market, they will respond you in the same pattern. And it's also almost like a mouthpiece for the government itself.
All right, let's take a quick break. You're watching Correspondents on TaiwanPlus. Next up, we'll be talking about whether Trump could take aim at Taiwan. And as the military threat from China grows, why has Taiwan cut its defense budget? Back in a moment. Welcome back to Correspondents. We're talking today to Taipei-based journalist Demes and Kris Lih. And we're going to delve now into Taiwan-U.S. relations under President Trump. Let's consider first, though, a press conference that President Trump gave along with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. President Trump said that the U.S. should take over Gaza, redevelop it into the, quote, Riviera of the Middle East, and resettle Palestinians elsewhere. Now, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say these comments took the world by surprise. They triggered widespread outrage, particularly in the Middle East. Could he say something equally audacious about Taiwan, along the lines of one of his staff, the State Department's acting top public diplomacy official, Darren Beattie? Take a look at what he wrote last year on X. He said, Taiwan will inevitably belong to China. It's only a matter of time. It's not worth expending any capital to prevent. A visionary statesman will recognize this and make a deal. In exchange for acknowledgement of this basic reality, get some serious concessions on Africa and Antarctica. Big deal to be made. David, is there concern in Taiwan that Trump might actually push such a deal, despite Washington's long-standing policy not to take a position on Taiwan's sovereignty?
I think this kind of argument plays right into, the U.S. skepticism that we've seen during the last election, being also pushed by a lot of PRC bots online. So I think the fact that we can't be certain of U.S. support, like maybe we were during the Biden administration. So I think it is definitely a source for concern. And as I said, it plays right into this, existing narrative of we can't trust the U.S. That's already happening, like on social media in discussions all around the country. And then also for us as journalists, I mean, we all dread every morning waking up, looking at our phones. Did he say something audacious, like outrageous again, maybe about Taiwan this time? So yeah, it's definitely changed our work dynamic as well.
Taiwan doesn't have official relations with Washington. So is there any way the Taiwanese government can speak to the Trump administration?
Just as recently, the deputy economic minister and his team that flew to Washington, and they're waiting to see Donald Trump and his team. And so hopefully, with a meeting like that, they can hopefully strike a sweet deal per se.
And that's specifically on tariffs, that meeting.
On tariffs, exactly. Hopefully, that deal can benefit both sides, because right now everything Donald Trump says and does, I think the world, and not just Taiwan, the world needs to take it cautiously. You don't have. I think somebody had said this before. You don't have to take it seriously, but you must take it cautiously. I think that's the important attitude to have during this new era.
And what has Taiwan done to prepare for Trump 2.0?
Yeah, I think the question is whether Taiwan has done enough, and like an outreach like this, whether it's too late. I mean, there's definitely been criticism about maybe the DPP government not being prepared enough for a Trump presidency, and not reaching out early enough, and betting on the wrong horses. At least from the public side, what we see, what kind of Republican officials are invited to Taiwan and come here quite publicly, like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, these types who are obviously out of the loop in Washington. I mean, Trump just canceled both of their security clearances as well, but also the security details. So he doesn't even care about their physical safety anymore. So I'm not sure we should, put too much effort into this kind of old Republican guard. We should probably try to reach out to people like Mr. Beattie or others who are currently in power in the U.S.
TSMC, they're in the U.S. and they're going
Taiwan's biggest chip maker.
Yes, and they're going to have a board meeting for the first time on U.S. soil in their Arizona base. So hopefully something coming out of the boardroom will also be able to benefit the U.S.-Taiwan talks. And apart from that, it's recently the Financial Times, they cited an unknown source from TSMC saying that perhaps TSMC can commit more investments in the U.S. as a way to attract Trump and his team more. So that's one. And then two is upgrade the U.S. fabs to more advanced processing, so it's faster than the current efficiency, and maybe build an advanced chip packaging plant in the United States. It's important because the advanced processing technology and the advanced packaging plant, these two are quite important for the entire production of a semiconductor chip. If the U.S. were to have such technology advancement on its soil, then maybe for Donald Trump and his team, this is probably a win situation for them and on the global market.
And Trump, of course, has said that not just Taiwan, many countries should be paying more for their defense. Taiwan, in particular, is a special case. But the government's proposed budget for this year has been cut by the opposition, because the opposition control the legislature. So the defense budget's been cut just under 2% of what was proposed, but 19% has been frozen. This cut in the defense budget, David, is this going to affect the way Trump views Taiwan's relations with the U.S.?
I think we all know that Trump takes foreign partners or allies' ability or willingness to, quote unquote, pay their fair share of the defense burden. So if someone tells him that Taiwan is cutting their defense budget, I think he won't, welcome that kind of development. And I remember, like, after Trump was elected, the DPP was actually, publicly saying they were open to buying more weapons from the U.S. As like a sign to reach out to the new administration. But then in the spring, we saw during the budget negotiations that the TPP and the KMT cut the budget, as you said, and they, for example, the indigenous submarine program was frozen 50%. And I think for the future planning and manufacturing of such a huge project, it's a huge blow. If Trump is watching, if his Defense Department is watching, they won't like this development.
And Kris, why is Taiwan cutting its defense budget given the threats that it faces from China?
Well, it seems like from the legislative yuan with the KMT plus TPP pact, they think there are a lot of unnecessary operational expenses that are going around with various government agencies. So they think these so-called operational expenses are being spent at places where they shouldn't be in. This is their argument. And from the defense aspect, cutting 8.4 billion NT dollars of defense budget,
or about 250 million US dollars.
This is bad because a lot of it goes into training and also weapon program expansion, and as well as, say, military base expansion. These elements are quite crucial to, say, the construct of a military power. And when it comes to military training, a lot of money that goes into the training aspect actually are spent on things like the actual training itself, as well as training or sending soldiers abroad to get trained in foreign countries where foreign allies would host these soldiers. So, for example, a lot of Taiwanese soldiers, they get sent to America to the artillery schools or to the Marine Corps schools to get trained to be better soldiers, better officers, and then they can come back to use the expertise they have learned in those countries to lead the next generation of men and women.
Before we go, let's take a quick look at what's on your reporter's notebook. Kris, what are you keeping an eye on?
Myself and our team included, we're focusing on the relationship between USAID and various groups in Taiwan. And recently we started digging into it, and we found some pretty interesting results. We found out that the Presidential Office of Taiwan is a recipient of the program, but specifically in what way we still are looking into the database, but one of them is the presidential office and also various universities across Taiwan.
It will be interesting. David, how about you? What are you keeping an eye on at the moment?
Well, more recently, I'll be keeping an eye out for the German elections coming up because we're electing a new parliament on the 23rd. how the new government, when we will be able to form a majority, we'll see, how they'll position themselves with regard to China, with regard to Taiwan. That's definitely something I'll keep an eye out for, especially since the last coalition government was the first one in German history that actually mentioned Taiwan in their coalition agreement. And I'm not so sure that's going to happen again for the next coalitions. And then a second topic is Taiwan's nuclear energy phase out, which will happen in around mid-May, with the last reactor that's going to stop operating in Pingdong. And as Germany as well is a country without left nuclear energy behind, that's definitely something that German readers will be interested to learn about.
Thanks again, both of you, David and Kris, for joining me on Correspondents. And thank you for watching. I'm Louise Watt. If you're watching on YouTube, do subscribe to the Correspondents playlist to get the latest episodes. I look forward to seeing you again next time.